Hello and welcome back to Comic Book Blueprint, where we take my comic Death's Favorite Daughter and I break it down to you in separate, small, digestible bites so I can show you how I make comics and how you can make your own comics. We've penciled, inked, and colored our comics, so now it's time for... Okay, so... lettering. Yeah, as far as comic lettering goes...
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
So, I'm no pro at this, but I do have a pretty good idea of what doesn't work. A lot of the times your comics can have awesome art, an awesome story, and even a cool concept that hasn't been done before, but if your comic panels start to look like a poorly illuminated wall in Chicago, it can make your comics unreadable and uninteresting to your audience. I mean, you're not going to pick up a comic if you can't even understand what the characters are talking about. So, I am here as an amateur comic artist who doesn't know what he's talking about, but hopefully you listen to him anyway, to talk about some of the basics of comic book lettering.
So let's do this thing!
Before we get started, I just want to say that if you want a fully comprehensive and awesome channel to follow to help you with your comic book lettering questions, I highly recommend Bad Ink Studios. They post really helpful tutorials and tips on how to letter stuff in your comics, from the basics to very specific scenarios. And also they post most of their stuff in short form content, so you can go to their channels, either on TikTok or on YouTube, and I think they're on Instagram, I don't remember, maybe, editor?
Oh yeah.
And binge hundreds of their videos about how to letter your comic. For real, these are the guys that I go to for most of my lettering questions, and they do not disappoint, ever. They're very good at what they do, so seriously, give them a like, subscribe, follow them on whatever socials that they're on. They're great. Anyway, I'm going to do my best to share just as much, or at least as much as I can, about the basics of comic lettering by showing the process of lettering this chapter of my webcomic, Death's Favorite Daughter. Available now on Webtoons, link in the description, and in the card, and over here, and there, and everywhere. Go check it out, I love it, it's great. Self-promotion. In Adobe Illustrator, I have placed these 10 or so pages on their own artboards so that they are stacked up on top of each other. This is important if any of our text or comic bubbles extend to our next panel. Like in this example. You can use other programs like Clip Studio Paint for comic lettering, but I have found that Illustrator has the best controls and tools to make the best lettering, even if Adobe sucks sometimes. For me, I separate lettering into 3 categories that kind of intersect and interchange parts depending on context. You have the body text, caption text, and sound effects. Let me break down what each of those are for you. First, we have caption text, or just captions. This is the most basic and easy part of your comic lettering. Basically, this is the small box in the corner where stuff with asterisks are like translated from underspeak, or references to events mentioned in the comics, like Efeldrin hasn't eaten since chapter 1. You can also use this space to add jokes or references to your narrative, or you can also have none of these at all. They're completely optional. Most often I use this for translation notes or minor details that add a layer of information to the comic that would otherwise clog up the flow of the story. You don't want just characters saying, "Ah, you're speaking in French," or "Oh, do you remember when that happened a couple of issues ago?" I mean, unless you're trying to break the fourth wall, in which case that's a whole nother topic, but anyway. There's no real reason to make these notes any longer than 2 lines or so make sure to keep these to a minimum if you plan on using them. Again, they're completely optional. You don't have to have them. They're just nice to have, and they're very basic. There's not really any tips or tricks to them, unless you want to look at writing tips or tricks, which in that case, that's a whole nother video, and I'm not getting into that. Next up, we have the body text. This is all the words that the characters are saying or thinking, as well as the narration, if there is any. This is the basic meat of the comic, so we need the words to stay simple and easy to read and understand. This is the boringest yet most important part of your comic's text as far as just the type goes. If your font is too difficult to read or oddly formatted, then no one will want to read your comics, no matter how hard you worked on it, or how good the art is, or even the story, or maybe even the dialogue. If it can't be read, no one cares. So be a professional. Choose a font that is sans serif, which just means it's without this little thingy right here, and a font that looks good capitalized as well as lowercase. It's also important to have a font that has an italicized and bold options to emphasize important parts of the sentence, or to show when a character is whispering or shouting or any other way that you want your character to talk. This font has to be as flexible as possible while also being super easy to read for your viewers, as it is going in every single comic bubble. For my webcomic, I'm using a 22-sized font that graphic designers everywhere hate and loathe.
A monster.
Yes, I know. Comic Sans is locally hated, but it's really easy to read, easy to use, and it's also free, so I'll use it for the body of my text until I find something better to use, honestly. And finally, we have sound effects, the most subjective and possibly divisive of all comic book lettering. Now, not everybody likes to have all of their twangs and bams and shovzhows in the comic itself. They want that to be implied or less played up, because a lot of the times it makes your comic look less professional or kind of old or retro in a way that they don't want their comics to look. This is why a lot of times people who are writing graphic novels try to downplay their sound effects so that their comic is taken more seriously, but not every time is that the case. It's the same with manga or with webcomics. Sometimes people don't like to have sound effects because they think it interrupts their story or just looks childish, but that's, again, all preference. If you want to have all of your twangs or bams or oofs in big colorful letters, that's fine. Or maybe you don't, and that's fine as well, but just make sure to be consistent in your style, as there are millions of ways to make your sound effects. But the main idea, whether you're going minimalistic or big and cartoony, is to convey sounds and their weight to the scene in text format. Personally, I like a mix of big, bright, colorful letters that you'll see in classic comics with a modern twist, with making sure that the colors actually meld with the scenes in the background so that I have a nice bit of balance between having a huge text effects while also using modern color schemes. For instance, here I have a demon getting their head chopped by a sword. This is a quick and surprising panel, so I want my sound effects to be loud and nasty and convey the violence that has just happened. So I use a good old-fashioned splorch. Yeah, I love using that sound, it's so awesome. I've used the colors of the background, the pink demon blood, and the arc of the splatter to help give me context to the reader so that they can tell in an instant, yeah, he ain't getting up from that one. And that's the power of sound effects text. It can uniquely give context to a scene and inform the reader of how the reader should read the story, and it can also work in tandem with the artwork. This is something that you can't really do anywhere else in any other medium. And while you may see sound effects in text or in movies or maybe shows and games, nothing can quite make those onomatopoeia sounds that the human brain translates from the comic book page into their imagination. That's why comics are such an awesome medium to work with, by taking written word and images and translating it into an experience that happens within the human mind. Okay, so now that we have the three categories figured out, let me break down some of how I format my lettering when it comes to body text. And if you want to hear me rant and rave about the details of how I break down lettering even more, then check out the long version of this footage, where I talk for hours about how I letter comics, how I do sound effects, and everything else. The link is in the card and in the description. The comic bubbles that I use in my stories are constructed using the shape tool in Illustrator. I use a 3-point stroke to make the overall shape, and then the type tool to paste in the text from my script that I've written. I want to make sure that the text has room to breathe within the bubble while still filling it nicely and balanced. There are exceptions to this rule, of course, but this video will never end if I go all in onto what and how and where and whatever, but trust me, Bad Ink Studios, I think I've promoted them already, but they're good. You should go watch them. They cover this a lot better than I ever could. When I'm working with large bits of text, I try to break down the text into 20 words or so per bubble. If a bubble seems too big for the panel, I try to either add another bubble with a longer tail or just connect the bubble to the other to show that the topic is still being carried from one bubble to the next. There are times where the topic shifts, so in that case I'll add a separate tail to another bubble. I've said bubble so many times now, it doesn't sound like a word to me anymore. It's just like bubble, 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 bubble? Is bubble a word? Am I speaking English? Every bubble is white with a black outline, unless I want to emphasize a certain aspect or emotion. And this is where we can begin to see where we can mix some of the aspects of the three categories of text. So if a character is shouting angrily, I can emphasize that anger with a red outline, or add noise to the outside of the bubble to show the character losing it, or change the font inside the bubble and make it so big that it's breaking outside of the text bubble, and even change the shape or maybe even the color, and on we go. We can use a lot of different elements from the different types of text to emphasize what's happening and tell the story of what and how the characters are speaking. Every aspect of comic lettering can be stacked or combined or removed removed to make your comic text pop. So don't just get stuck in a rut while you're making a conversation in your comic. Try to think about, how can I make this conversation really stick with the reader, or emphasize what the topic is, or show its importance, or show it's completely pointless, or banal, or in the background, or up close, or in your face, or on the radio. There's so many different ways that you can show your comic book text. But as you can see, I'm kind of running out of time on this video. There are so many ways that you can show your story through comic book text in tandem with your art. But remember that comic book lettering isn't a comprehensive topic, and it can't be contained in one video, so let me know if there's anything that you want to know that I missed, and I'll see that I can address it in another video. But for now, these pages look pretty sweet, so I'm gonna call this one finished. Thank you so much for watching. We've been on a long journey since we started talking about how to make comics, but now we have completed this webcomic, so we're ready to go.
Nope.
No?
Not even close.
So maybe there's more to talk about and break down how to make comics, and I promise that I will make those videos. There's a lot more that I want to cover. I want to revisit some of the things that I originally talked about and thought I was done and realized that I missed something, or even expand upon some of the parts like this video and the coloring video and so many other things. But in the meantime, thanks again for watching. Now go make something awesome.